Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 85 of High Spirits. I'm Anna Ray Grabstein, and today I'll be joined by a special guest, but not my fantastic co host, Ben Larson. We're missing him today. He's out. We are recording Thursday, April 24th, 2025, and we're going to be talking with Kris Walker from Hoodie Analytics all about 420 data and the macro environment in the cannabis industry. But before we dive into that conversation, I want to check in with the audience. I'm coming off a great weekend. I had a celebration on Sunday, 420, that was this mashup of Passover and Easter and Earth Day and 420 with a bunch of families and kids at my house. It was amazing. And this weekend, I am headed to totally unplug to Yosemite. And so, if anybody has experience with unplugging recently and turning off their cell phones and their Wi Fi, send me some love. I'm realizing I'm a little nervous about it, which doesn't make me feel good. I want it to be easier to unplug. So, um, moving into a bit of news, I wanted to just call out and appreciate the Green Market Report, who's been bringing all of us in the cannabis industry business news for a couple years now. And Deborah Borchardt, John Schroyer, and the entire team have just had the business cut off by Crane Media, who is the owner of Green Market Report. And it's a sad day. Media is really hard. The cannabis media space is even harder. And we all are going to be equipped with less business insights than we were before. So I hope that someone steps up to fill the gap. And I hope that all of us really stand behind the existing media groups like Marijuana Moment and Cultivated and support them in their efforts to make sure that we can keep getting good information because we need it. And it helps us to be smarter and more thoughtful in everything that we do as leaders in the space. Just a couple quick news updates today. Maryland just passed a law allowing cannabis businesses to convert to ESOPs, which are employee stock ownership plans. We've talked about ESOPs on the podcast before. We had on Darren Gleeman, who's a banker that facilitates the transactions of cannabis businesses to become ESOPs. And it's a really I think, useful structure for businesses that can become employee owned, but also have an exit path by being able to sell to the employees. So the founders and the existing cap table can find an exit that isn't necessarily an acquisition by another company. And so this is good news for Maryland cannabis founders and also for Maryland cannabis employees. Of note, there are some states, like the state of Washington, that doesn't allow cannabis ESOPs at all. And that is a strange thing, in my opinion, considering that there is so much effort to create equity in cannabis that that a state wouldn't allow it. And it has to do with disclosure of owners. And the state thinks that having the company held in a trust, which is the way the ESOPs are formed, doesn't facilitate that level of needed transparency. So Maryland is allowing companies to convert to these ESOPs and allowing them to bypass a 5-year transfer restriction on licenses early to convert. So this is good news. Nice to have some good news out there for operators. Another thing to touch on is that the Wine and Spirits Wholesalers of America, often called the WSWA, one of the largest alcohol trade associations in the US, has been in Washington lobbying for federal framework to allow cannabinoid-infused beverages. The WSWA is urging lawmakers to clarify rules around hemp-derived cannabinoid products in the next Farm Bill. And the group said in a press release, quote, that it believes the next farm bill should explicitly allow for the production of only naturally derived THC products from hemp, specifically Delta 9, while explicitly granting individual states primary authority to regulate, distribute, and sell, including allowing states to prohibit and to ensure that consumers over the age of 21 are the only people buying these products. So this is really interesting to see the WSWA planting a very clear flag on their policy agenda as it relates to cannabis beverages. And and their commitment to rallying behind the Farm Bill as the path forward. So yeah, there is lots of other news in cannabis, but we don't have the Green Market Report to help us have access to it as easily. So we will keep trying to bring you the things that we think are most interesting here on this show. But now we will transition into bringing on our guest. Today's guest has been behind some of the biggest insights in cannabis commerce. Kris Walker is the president and chief commercial officer at Hoodie Analytics, where he's leading the charge on helping cannabis companies make better decisions with better data. Kris started his career at Procter & Gamble and went on to become an SVP at Nielsen, the global leader in audience and market analytics. At Hoodie, he brings decades of experience in CPG, retail, and tech to the most complex regulated market that there is, cannabis. He's a straight shooter, a data evangelist, and a believer that execution is everything. So I'm excited to bring Kris onto the show today. Welcome, Kris.
Thanks for having me. Very good it's great to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, we set this up a long time ago because I knew that you would be a great person to come on this week after 420 and share with us some of the numbers. So tell me, was it a wild 420 in the industry? There hasn't been a lot of talk about what happened.
So 420 as in the industry this year, it does unfortunately look like it was a bit of a wash. I'm not going to say wash out, because there was still some strong performances on 420 by some states and some specific players, but in general, I think the industry fell victim to 420 falling on a Sunday, which was also Easter and also the end of Passover. And there's just a lot of things that were pulling people's attention away from what is traditionally a stronger day. So we did get some decent results overall, but to find them, you really need to look across the entire weekend and even a couple of days before to look at that overall contribution around the 420 holiday.
Yeah. Well, historically, cannabis has been basically the cannabis's version of Black Friday, the highest sales day of the year. And whereas 420 this year fell on a Sunday, it seems like you mentioned, the industry was really trying to promote this whole week of 420. And so if you look at the whole week, it seems like from the data that you shared with me that Friday and Saturday were bigger days than Sunday, and that overall there was still an outperformance from a regular week. It was just a pretty steep decline from the 2024 performance. Is that right? Can you give us some actual percentages?
Yeah, it was still a good week. And we had, and obviously, I'm talking in generalities across the, averages across the entire industry. I mean, there are some dispensaries who just killed it, right? Some brands just killed it. But in general, it was definitely a way better week than a normal week was. Sunday was way better than a normal Sunday. But if you look year over year at the overall performance, like the entire weekend, the lift that it was roughly about 12% softer this year than last year if you look at across the entire weekend. And obviously looking 420 versus 420, there was a significant delta because you're comparing a Saturday where like everything was concentrated to a Sunday, which is a softer day, Easter, Passover, everything else going on that day. But again, probably the number that most people are going to care about is the overall contributions to their business. And we probably saw about 12% soft, across the entirety of the U.S., about a 12% hit versus last year.
How do you interpret the shift in consumer behavior at a macro level? Do you think that people are less interested in 420, that this is really just because of Easter and Passover and it being a Sunday? How do you think about this?
You hear different things. So I at the end of the day, I do think there is a lot of different noise and messages that are pulling at consumers' attention every single day these days. I mean, the media is unfortunately something that a lot of people are trying to stay away from right now. With the stock market challenges, People may not be as excited about stocking up on their favorite cannabis products because they don't know what the future is going to hold. We're going. What we do know is as a fact is that you saw some pretty significant demographic differences and where you had the 420 lifts, and areas that are more suburban, people that have families and are probably celebrating Easter and doing different things on Easter itself, did not get the same kind of uplifts that they had last year. Whereas, if you look at younger areas that are predominantly younger, urban, like you got a bit more consistency in performance versus a year ago. So that would lead me to believe that there is definitely a stronger impact because of the unique holidays that fell on that day itself versus any sort of macro consumer trends away from 420, the holiday.
Do you guys track promotional saturation and discounting in your data? Can you tell how much something was discounted?
We do. And this discounts this year were it's obviously it's a big blend of averages. We did see gummies in particular seem to have a little stronger discounts this year than we saw in previous years. But overall, we did see the discounts tended to be spread across the week. As I think in previous years when we had 420 on a Thursday, Friday, or Saturday, a lot of retailers used that as to provide very unique promotions just on the day. But I think preemptively, a lot of retailers this year decided to make their 420, the 420 discounts spread across the week, and so we do see that people were purchasing more on discount this year throughout the week, not just isolated to that one single day of 420. There's pretty good charts that are showing that the percentage of sales on discount on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday this year are much higher than they were last year. Versus last year, it did seem like everyone was like, I'm going to wait and buy everything at 420 because I'm going to get these amazing deals.
Well, so with all this insight about the deals and the performance at the store level, do you think that the industry needs to be rethinking this holiday-based sales focus in the context of like a more maturing consumer, and that behavior is shifting towards just keeping products at home all the time, and that cannabis is just like having beer in the fridge, or is this holiday-based sales focus something that really is meaningful and that retailers should pay attention to, build strategy on?
I personally believe that retailers, and brands, holidays create excitement. We know, Valentine's Day and, things like that. Like they're brand, and you've got, what is the Amazon holiday? And I should know this offhand.
Oh yeah. Yes, the Amazon holiday. It's a fake holiday that someone created. But you have all these manufactured holidays. Why do we have them? Because it gives us something to talk about. It gives us excitement. It's newsworthy. People will talk about it. I do not think it's a smart move to go away from it. I think you want the national attention that 420 gives you. That should be something we celebrate and we look to leverage as an industry as much as we can. Now, should we be smarter about how we promote and how we communicate and how we manage stock and inventory? 100%. We need to be way better about it. There are a number of operators, that make a conscious effort to, not necessarily give away product at half off, like on 420, because they know when they do that, their customers will load up on that day and they won't be back for the rest of the month, And so that doesn't drive a lot of benefit for that retailer. Yes, it's great for the consumer because the consumer was able to, obviously benefit from it, but from the retailer who's in the business to make money, it hurts them longer term. So we are seeing that smarter retailers are realizing that we need to give them a reason to come out to celebrate this plant and to celebrate the product. But it doesn't always have to be through getting 50% off discounts.
discounts. And, you referenced Black Friday earlier. And I mean, you see that happening in Black Friday now as well. Like the discounts went from everyone lining up outside the stores the night before so they could be there at 6 a.m. when they open. And then it became a whole weekend, and now it's a whole week. And, and so you're getting those discounts spread out. And I don't know that there's a lot, the retailers themselves are getting as much of a benefit, but they're trying to extend the opportunity longer. And, to some extent, it played out a little bit that way this year just because of the nature of the holiday. But like I said, overall, it's a 12% hit that everyone took on average.
Yeah. I like what you said about the consumers having a reason to come to the store, though. I spoke with my mom last night. She's 75, and I asked her how her weekend was, and she said, "Oh, it's fine. Oh, your father went with his friend to the dispensary on 420 and had so much fun getting all of these discounts."
Sure.
And I thought, wow, when it has reached the 75-year-olds that they get discounts on 420, it's like, this is a real holiday now, apparently. It's reached the masses fully. And it's true. My dad went with one of his other 70-year-old plus friends, and they went to the dispensary together, and they came home with a bunch of very strange products that they would have never purchased otherwise. And I thought that was a good sign, because they bought stuff that they wouldn't have already been going there to purchase. He often goes and buys flour or pre-rolls, but he came home with tablets and tincture and other fun things that the bud tender, suggested. And it seems like it was positive for introduction of new categories in that example. But I don't know if that's true across the board.
Well, it's funny you referenced your father being 75. So I mean, he's right on the cusp of what our demographic age cutoff. Like we looked at all the data in like blocks of 65 to 74, 75 to 84, 85 plus. And actually, the 75 to 84 bracket actually this year had the biggest fall off for the weekend. Now I do think, your father being 75 to 84, he's right on the border there. And actually the 65 to 74s were fairly, it was a good year for that, for 420 for those folks. But we did see a fall off in the older consumer, like 75 plus. There was definitely a fairly sizable fall off on their investments in 420 this year. And the other one was kind of interesting was the 45 to 54, which is kind of the generation where this all started. And so we did, that one age group dropped about 20%.
That is interesting. What about brands? We didn't talk about what you saw in terms of brands or specific form factors. What popped out of the data in that?
It's a little all over the board. Depending on the states and obviously the specific location of the specific brand. So what we did find is there was a decent amount of trend of folks using non-core brands to really drive people in with just some crazy discounts. And so seeing some of the largest lifts that we saw were on brands that most people on this call would never have heard of. Like they were isolated to certain areas. They were really, they used this as a chance to get their name out and get that distribution, and they blew through the product at very high discounts and got great uplifts. But again, it's kind of a means to an end for the retailers. I'm not sure that the brand itself is going to get the follow-on impact, and taking what was a 75% discount and now moving, trying to get a consumer away from doing that, is going to be challenging. But we did see, flour in particular, was a little all over the board with top brands. I mean, you've got a lot of the normal names in there, in edibles, again, in a similar way, it was less the known brands that got the biggest uplifts as much as it was these newer, some of the newer and kind of, I'll call them less top 10 gummies and less top 10 edibles that were getting the biggest bumps. And again, I mean, for better or worse, I think some of that probably comes down to the fact that the larger brands probably have a bit more discipline in pricing and margin management, and they know that this is still an industry that people are in to make money, and so getting a 300% lift is probably not what they're looking to do. Their goal is to grow their share over the duration, not just on that one day.
Sure. Well, so starting to shift away from 420, I think that my takeaways from what you've shared is that it wasn't a total loss, but it just didn't match past impact for a lot of reasons, and that it still remains a vital sales opportunity, and that looking to 2026 and the future, like, retailers shouldn't give up on promoting 420, just maybe getting a little bit more grounded in realism of the different fundamentals that are going to drive behavior around the holiday makes sense. Anything else that we should mention about 420 before we move on to just bigger discussion about data?
I mean, just a lot of the trends that we're seeing at a macro level were pronounced here as well. I mean, pre-rolls did very well. I mean, we've seen a big move towards that. Pre-rolls as a convenient form factor has had probably the strongest growth this year relative to a lot of the other categories, and we saw that continue with in 420. Flower was king once again. Some of the it was interesting, like I said, just to look at those brands that chose to go with heavy discounts versus a year ago. I think some of your more national brands were just more thoughtful about how they deployed their programs. So it wasn't just around X amount of percent off or dollars off, but come in and you get a hat, or you get something that is meaningful that will maybe incentivize you to come back and pay full price for my product the next time you try it. And so anyway, there's just some smarter behavior, for folks that probably felt like they had to do something different this year because the date was in fact on a special day, with it being Easter, than just a normal Saturday.
Sure. I love this. You just said smarter behavior, and I think it's a perfect segue into this concept of just how we're all running our businesses, how cannabis businesses are deploying smart insights to make decisions. And I've been in this for a long time, and there is more data today than there's ever been. There are multiple different companies that are selling different types of data, and I'm curious for you to give us your perspective on where we are in the evolution of creating data and using data in cannabis, as someone that has worked previously for some of the biggest data companies in the world and CPG companies that are experts at deploying data. Yeah. What are you seeing? What's the environment like?
So it's funny. I've got one of my co-founders, Kelly Bernazza Hall, and I were talking about this yesterday because we're prepping for a keynote that we're doing at MGM Pack next week on market trends, and and I was raising to her. I was like, what would it be like, right? Zooming out for a minute. If I showed you, if I asked you, like, what's going on with pricing in the past 12 months or 18 months or 2 years, you, like everybody else, would say, oh, well, it's been coming way down. Pricing's coming down, and surprise, surprise, it's doing it again. Michigan flower pricing is down 20% in 1 year, 20%. And you see it across the board, right? As everyone's like, oh, well, it's a new market, so it starts high and it starts profitable, but then after a while it becomes less profitable and people aren't making money anymore. And why is this happening? Why is it continuing to happen over and over again? And to be fair, you've got some markets like Missouri is a good example. People are still making good money in Missouri. Like, it's a good market. You can get good product there. Operators and brands are making money in Missouri. And they have a price point that's probably a bit more sustainable for allowing that to happen. So it's a long-winded way of saying, Kelly and I were talking about this, and I was hypothesizing, like, if we were just able to snap our fingers and go back in time like 3 years and take, all of the cannabis operators, and like, just keep in mind, we are a young industry with lots of people who are coming into it for the first time. We may not have the experience of some of these bigger brands and bigger retailers. And, and we were, so if we had the ability to replace every operator with an experienced, person who ran Kroger, or person who ran, I don't know, Banana Republic, these experienced retail operators who are used to using data and making smart decisions and not being as reactive to changes to what the guy across the street did. Like, would it make a difference? Like, would we be would we still have $40 eighth pricing in Michigan, or would we be where we are now at 20, right? And so, and Kelly said to me, she was like, I'm not sure it'd make a difference. It might help, but because one of the theories is like, we need to educate the industry. We need to give that, let people have more, get people that are more experienced to learn how to do these cool things. Kelly's point to me, she's like, well, Kris, the other issue is just the data hasn't been there. Like, it just hasn't, so even if you have the best people there, if you don't have the data and tools to be able to make the right decisions, you're still using gut feel and having to be reactive. And so I do think there's this combination of the industry, I do think, has evolved now where the data and tools are available, but we still also have to have the discipline and the people and the accountability to each other to say, hey, guys, because maybe it's not a good idea for all of us to just drop our prices by 50% on 420. Maybe we can get the same results with 30%.
Because this is something this is a big deal, is sort of this endless race to the bottom with pricing. And I like that you're bringing it up. And I'm curious to understand from your perspective, what is the discipline that data can support to help people not lower their pricing? Because I perceive that the price compression is being driven by oversupply and desperation. And so people are trying to just bring in cash as fast as they can. They're not even thinking about the market. But then it's having these market ripples where then people are having to follow, and it's just this endless race. But what is the data that can help us to better manage pricing from your perspective?
I probably should answer this two ways. I will answer the technical side first. So, there is a volume price trade-off equation, right? It's called price elasticity, right? So the way you should think of that is, if I drop my price by 10%, how much more volume am I going to get? Am I going to get more people through the door? Am I going to sell more stuff? Am I going to make more money? Okay. And the answer might be, yes, I should drop my price by 10% because it's going to bring 20% more, to my bottom line. That's a great win-win. If I drop my price by 20%, am I going to make more than if I did 10%, or am I going to make less? And so this concept of price elasticity basically allows you to understand the impact of what happens if I drop my price by 10%, 20%, 30%. And you can do the same thing for promotions. And the data's there, right? Like, the data now exists with Hoodie, that you can start measuring the impact to your business. If you drop your price, you raise your price, what's going to happen? Because, by the way, everyone's petrified of raising prices. Oh my God, I raised price. Look at, that I could tell you, in the CPG industry and like other industries that that I came from, that is much more of an emotional concern than a practical concern. Because generally, when you raise your prices, yes, you're going to lose a bit of business, but you're going to make more money, right? So you should probably still do it, right? Now, if you get to a point where you're suddenly at 30% higher than anybody else, then yes, that's going to hurt you. But if you're on the margins, then there's a way you should be able to make more money by leveraging this idea of price elasticity, and that's the conceptual side, right? That's the real technical data side. Mm-hmm. The other side is you need there are ways that you can manage pricing in order to maximize your profits, right? And like you said, the whole point about oversupply. Oversupply is great. So I've got a lot of product. That means all the brands can get product for cheaper. Smart retailers can negotiate better deals. Now, smart retailer also, there's no need for them to be passing on that price discount to the consumer. And so what we saw a couple of years ago is all the brands went, and you had a bunch of retailers sitting there and said, thank you very much. I love the fact that I can now make 2 times the amount of profit on this product than I did just 6 months ago, but I'm going to hold my price flat, because at the end of the day, the consumers are willing to pay for it. They're going to pay for a good experience. They're going to pay for good brands. They're going to pay for that opportunity. They're going to pay for that brand experience. And I don't need to just throw money away because I'm getting a better deal on it. And so having the discipline for a retailer to understand what's going to happen if I do these things, not just today, but for the longer term, it's important. And so I mean, that's, and again, I can go on about the, so go ahead.
I was going to say, I just love that you're talking about this as a discipline, because I think that it really is, in that leaders are being, I think, pressured by market forces and what they perceive to be consumer behaviors to go down, 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 but sticking with the pricing that is profitable and that makes sense in the market is what you're saying can be more profitable at the retail level. And this concept
100%.
of when the prices are going down at wholesale, of keeping your prices steady in the market. I've been advising people to do this for a while. It's like, your store isn't profitable yet. So if the product costs less money, this is a good thing. This means that you might make more money per transaction, which is what you need to not be in the red. And in general, like, we need to be moving out of the red in this industry and into the black, and up and to the right. And the way that we do that is by being able to see clear lines of profitability and
100%.
and just having set markups, especially if stores were just always going with like a 2x markup as an example. But then all of a sudden the prices start dropping of their wholesale supply and they stick with that 2x markup, but they're not selling more product. All of a sudden their profit is declining and they can't pay their staff. They can't pay their benefits. They can't pay their rent, because the same number of transactions and the same number of units are happening in the store, but they're making less dollars. And
That's correct.
And there's this difference between margin and dollars that I think is really important for people to understand, and to have a target of, what is your target average dollars per transaction, as opposed to just looking at what is the margin that you were able to capture on that transaction, can be, I think, a good way to start to create that discipline for an operator, to be able to understand kind of how it trickles through the whole business.
Yep. And that same concept, and not to go away from pricing, but too much, but that same concept is there for the taking across other disciplines in the industry as well. How if I have a brand and I've got one of the most expensive costs for brands is their selling organization, right? They've got really smart, great people that are out knocking on doors, selling products. And they live and die by, the success of their sales teams. Right. And so if you look at the cost of that, the sales organizations, you look at them as an asset, and the cost of that asset, you want to figure out how do I maximize the return? Like, for every dollar I'm spending with that sales guy to get back, to what's the return for me as a brand for my profit? And again, just looking at it with just from a process perspective and just with dollars and cents and data, we can say, hey, you know what? There are 100 different accounts I could go after. Like, there's 100 different stores in my market that I could go after that are not buying my product today. And you might have 10 of those stores that, I'm just using silly numbers, 10 of those stores are selling $1,000 a year of stuff. And another 10 of those stores are selling $1 million a year of stuff. And so, should I be spending the same amount of time with the 10 that are doing $1,000 as I should be with the 10 that are doing $1 million? And like, intuitively, obviously, the answer is no way. Because if I get 5% share of the $1 million store, that's worth $50,000. Versus if I get 5% of the $1,000 store, that's $5, or $50, and so that's a very different return for the same amount of time in many cases, right? And so trying to build discipline around your major cost drivers and how you go to market to say, maybe I don't need to be in every single dispensary in Michigan. I want to be in the 50% of stores in Michigan that actually do 80% of the total Michigan sales volume. And that is the cost to doing that is so much less, but the ROI that I have for every hour that my sales guys are spending is so much higher.
Yeah. Do you see that as one of the common pitfalls that you encounter in working with brands, is that they're spending the same effort, resources, dollars on all of the accounts as opposed to focusing on the most important ones?
Yeah. I mean, again, sales guys are smart, so they have some indication of like, this is a big account, this is a smaller account, but there's just, I will tell you, just to be very fair, there are a lot of organizations that are getting their act together that are starting to do a really good job at this. Okay. And layering in, account tiering, like by, this is an account of mine, but I should have 10% of their business. And right now I only have 2%. And if I can get 10% instead of 2%, that's worth $100,000 a year to me. So I'm willing to spend X amount of dollars in order to get that extra $100,000, right? And being very disciplined about assigning a certain value and a certain opportunity to every account in a market, and then basically incentivizing my sales teams to behave in certain ways to capture that opportunity, and then tracking their success at doing that through a tool like Hoodie that basically allows you to do that and hold everyone accountable to say, figure out who should get their bonus and who should get fired. And like, it's not just about relationships anymore. And some of it is, right? You still have, there's a lot people matter, right? And there's still a lot of that going on. So I'm never for 1 minute gonna say, that people don't matter, relationships don't matter. They do, like they matter in my business, but it's the relationship still has to be grounded in data. Like, you still have to say, hey, if you do this for me, it's going to make me this, it's going to make you this amount of dollars. And then you should hold me accountable for delivering against that. And if I make you that money, I'm going to expect you to come back and buy more stuff from me because you're going to make more money. And that's cyclical.
I like that you're talking about some of the things that are working for people, and that we're getting into what I like to be is like optimistic and being able to point to some of the strategies that can move the needle. So a company that decides that they want to focus on this one account that you said that, right now they have 2% of the business, they want 10% of their business, and that could move the needle for their company. The companies that are winning at a strategy like that, when they're saying, okay, we're going to spend more to try to capture more of the sell through in this store. What are some of the tactics that you're seeing people use?
So, obviously I'm going to start with the one that everyone has been using for a while, like build relationships, build trust, be creative. Okay.
So taking people to the basketball game. It
depends on, you have to define who the personality is.
Mm-hmm.
You should do, there are different people that are going to be motivated by different things. Okay. So I'll put that on the table. You should still use creativity and relationships, do relationship mapping and all that kind of discipline stuff. But the other thing that you have the opportunity to do is to become a trusted partner of that retailer by showing them how much you can help them grow their category, right? And not just maybe with your products. Like, you might, I hesitate to use any specific brands in a public forum like this, but let's say you are with Smokies, and you go in to say, hey, hey, retailer that I want to sell a bunch more stuff to, did you know that your gummy category is performing about 10% softer than other dispensaries just like yours? Like, in fact, you did about $100,000 in gummies last month, but all of your other competitors that are just like you, they did about $110,000. And let me tell you the things that they are doing that are a little bit different than you're doing right now. and maybe we can help grow that together, right? So in the CPG world that I came from, it's a term called category management, right? And so the idea is you're not just there to sell your own products and your own stuff. Yes, Smokies wants to sell as many Smoky gummies as they can, but the smart Smokies rep is going to partner with that retailer to teach them how they can grow the whole category. And then, and it may be like, hey, you don't actually need 30 different flavors of Smokies, because but what we know is that you need X amount of flavors of Smokies, and you're going to need something that's even more super premium. And then we know that you also need a value option. So make sure that you're meeting all of your customers and you got enough value options, enough mid-tier, enough here. And because what's going to happen is if you are helping that retailer grow their business, they're going to trust you. They're going to put more stuff of yours into their store, and you're both going to win together. And that's honestly like my number one recommendation, folks. It's like, don't be so self-interested, and remember that at the end of the day, your job is to help that retailer grow their business. And if you can give them other tools and tips and data and tricks to allow them to do that, they're going to want to spend more time with you and more money with you.
Yeah, it's a great tip, and moving towards better, more strategic category management in cannabis is something we should be talking about more. So I like it. Thank you for that. You alluded to this relationship with dispensaries, and I think that more and more it becomes clear as brands are in multiple states, or even if they're just becoming more successful in their existing state market, that dispensaries are very different, and that you can't have the same strategy for all stores. There's stores that are doing central buying through certain hubs and distributing to lots of different stores. There's stores that carry very different levels of inventory depending on their strategy. I'm just wondering what you find, and maybe it's something that you even just learned from getting to see all of the data, but what like a misconception that people have about retail channels in cannabis?
So, I jump in if I'm not answering your question is what you intended here. But you are correct. Like, particularly in the world of the MSOs, there's a lot of central buying and other challenges that a brand may have that does not have their own vertical distribution. And working with those folks, you do need to segment your customer base, right? So this idea of segmenting customers and creating and again, you can use a tool like Hoodie and go in, you can create all your own attributes and tag a dispensary to say, this one is a heavy promotion store. This one has a lot of competition. This one's sitting right on a non-legal border. This is a highly affluent dispensary. And like, we have a lot of that kind of baked in, but you can also create your own. It could be, I only visit this guy on Tuesdays and stuff like that. But you are going to want to segment your customers, right? And then again, my number one thing I tell everybody is you segment your customers around the opportunities you're trying to create. And then if you have some that are not going to be able to, you've got to handle them centrally, then assign someone that role that is good at that and support them with the selling stories to allow them to be successful in that role. And it's another one of the challenges we have as an industry is because there is so much fragmentation. The job of a salesperson is infinite. It's like, your job is, if you ask the salesperson the job description, they're like, well, I got these 95 things I have to do every single day. And it's like, how are you going to be successful in doing all those 95 things? Because I get it, John, you're really good with people, but you are terrible with following up with cash collections. And, John may not have ever been really good at handling, looking at data, telling stories with data. So is there an opportunity to compartmentalize those tasks in order to give John a better chance of being successful? And I really think it starts with segmenting your customers around things that that of how they purchase and how, in order to give you the best chance of being successful. The obvious one is, are they paying their bills or not? Like, if your job is to make money and is to stay financially solvent. And if I'm providing all of my inventory to somebody who's not paying their bills, that becomes challenging.
This is a great point, that even though we're mostly talking about brands selling to retailers in cannabis, that translates kind of across the supply chain to no matter what you're doing. This idea of customer segmentation, because how often are we getting promotional emails from companies that don't apply to us at all?
Yeah.
And what a waste, right? And what Kris, you're talking about here is really focusing on the outcome that we are trying to create with our effort, and segmenting around that. So whether you're a retailer sending out emails and text messages to consumers, or you're a brand that's trying to stock your product in retail stores, or even if you are a lawyer that is trying to serve the cannabis industry, like, segment your customers and try to serve the customers things that are going to be valuable and relevant to them. It's so important, because not only can it drive the outcome, but when you don't segment, or you do it wrong, people get offended and are just
Yeah.
like, ugh, spam, and ugh, leave me alone. You don't understand my business, and you're trying to come at this the wrong way. And it's a great way to become a less trusted partner, and people to
Exactly.
think that you're just not thinking of them and you don't know who they are.
Yeah. Yeah. I think personalization and segmentation is so important across. I agree with you. Like, it's so important across everything you do. And, I'm, I getting back to our pricing, pricing stuff that we started this on in 420. I won't name names, but I sat in a conference, and there was a CEO of another data company who basically told everyone at the conference that they've done all this analysis and segmented all the customers, and 80% of every product is bought on promotion. And so, because of that, we are not doing a good enough job to meet the needs of the promotionally deal sensitive consumer. And like, it killed me to hear, candidly. I'm like, this isn't, we need to be driving smarter decisions as an industry right now, and like segmenting customers, because like it, the fact that 80% of sales, like, even if you believe that number, 80% of products are bought on promotion in cannabis, that is because we as an industry are behaving in that way. That's not normal consumer behavior, because guess what? There were a bunch of people that walk in that store, and they were happy to pay full price for your brand because you've got an awesome brand. But they're happy to take the discount if you're going to give it to them, right? So I might as well take the discount. But you just lost. We call it cannibalization. Like, I ran a promotion, and the idea is that I want to get a whole bunch more sales because of the promotion, not just incentivize my existing customers who are already going to buy my product anyway, right? And so you have to ensure that the lift I'm getting is greater than the cannibalization. And right now, as an industry, we've got to acknowledge that there are plenty of people out there that are happy to pay $40, $50, $100, for an eighth of flower, if it's the right stuff, if it's meaningful, and it's, and it does, it makes me feel a certain way, or it just makes me feel good about myself. And there are a lot of things that can, it's I've used this analogy a bunch, but like, you can get a candle at Walmart for $1. You can go get the same candle at Bed Bath & Beyond for $10, or you can get the same candle that basically smells like Disneyland on Etsy for $50. It's the same candle. But I will buy that $50. There's a bunch of people out there happy to buy that $50 candle at, that creates, a feeling in me, and has an emotional attachment to, feeling like Disneyland and this candle. And I'm going to spend that $50, and I'm going to tell my friends about how amazing this made me feel. And guess what? You just made a whole bunch of money on and that's brand equity, right? That's creating brand equity. And that's the same candle. And there's no reason we cannot do the same in this industry.
Yes, cheers to that. And there's so many examples outside of cannabis of where perception of quality, love of a brand has driven premium pricing, and the cannabis industry, for better or for worse, has really degraded a lot of that, and people are just shopping on discounts because they're so used to it. They've been trained that way. We need to untrain the consumer. Well, so as we're getting closer to the hour, I'm curious, as we start to wrap this conversation, as a self-proclaimed data nerd, what are some of your favorite benchmarks that you look at when you open up the platform that you keep going back to again and again?
I learned a while ago that this concept of leading indicators versus trailing indicators. So being specific about it, like sales, dollar sales or unit sales, that's a trailing indicator. Like that has already happened, right? What you want to be measuring are the leading indicators of sales, the things that you can control that will give you those sales results, right? So like we know, sales is the number one driver of sales is distribution. And, so points of distribution, how many dispensaries am I in and how many SKUs do I have in each one of those dispensaries? That is a point of distribution. And, if you can get the points of distribution, you're going to eventually get the sales, right? And so you want to track leading indicators, right? You want to be managing to a price point or a price gap. So, in the CPG world, it's often called DSMP, distribution, shelving or share of shelf, merchandising, and pricing, right? So those are your 4 leading indicators that if you go to any like head of sales in the CPG world, they'll often like have a printout behind them on their desk with their DSMP KPIs that they know if they deliver on that, they're going to get their sales results, they're going to get their bonuses, their teams are going to be happy, and all is good. And so I do really try to focus on those leading indicators anytime you can.
I love that. Cool. Well, so looking ahead, I know that Hoodie is continuing to roll out some new stuff. Why don't you tell us what Hoodie is up to in 2025?
Awesome. The major we've been very fortunate. We've got a lot of Hoodie evangelists out there. I think we're working with 13 of the top 20 brands in the market right now, which is, and more and more each day. We've been very blessed and fortunate with the support we've had from this industry. To that end, we're excited about launching a new service called Hoodie Connect. And Hoodie Connect is going to allow a dispensary or retailer and a brand to be able to collaborate directly with each other, on KPIs and on measures that will allow them to both be more successful. So imagine a retailer no longer having to like take 100 phone calls from 100 different vendors to say, how did I do this week? Come on, Jane, tell me how I did. And the retailers that have been approved, will be able to actually just see the results directly. They can set KPIs, around, we're going to agree that we need to hit at least, 5 units per week on this product. And we need to hit a certain margin target, within 90 days. We can establish that. And then everyone's very transparent with what they need to do to achieve that. And if a brand doesn't achieve it, they see it and they can come back to the retailer to say, hey, you know what? It didn't work out. Like I'm right below it, but I think if we ran this extra promotion, or if I did some sampling with you, or we did some in-store training, we're gonna get there. And so it just allows a lot stronger collaboration. And then obviously on the ordering side, it gives the brands the opportunity to come up with recommended purchase orders for the retailer based off of how they're seeing their products performing in market and how products are performing in the industry as a whole. So, hey, I think this other product that we're seeing sell a lot of stuff in dispensaries just like you in Illinois, I think would add this amount of value to you. So why don't we try a case of that instead of this other one that's lower performing this time around, and just helping to facilitate that buying and purchasing, transaction. So keep a lookout for Hoodie Connect. It's going to be launching here in the next couple of weeks. You're going to see a lot more about this. We're very excited to be partnering with some of the biggest and most exciting brands and MSOs and retailers in the space with this. So more to come.
Awesome. It's great to hear about companies that are continuing to innovate within this compressed market environment. We need to keep moving forward and having that growth mindset to be able to do things better. So I love it. So thank you for sharing that.
Thanks.
My last question before we move to the last call is just if you were going to give a tip for brands to take just one step this year towards better data, how would you suggest that they get started? What would be the first step to becoming more data driven?
I think you need. You only give me one. You're only giving me one. You're making it tough.
You can give a couple if you want.
I'm going to say you need to. So as an individual or brand, one of the best things you can do is to basically showcase the value that a data-driven insight contributed to my business, right? And because one of the challenges you have in any organization is change, right? Well, we've been doing it this way for a while. It's been fine. Like, I don't need to use this stuff. I got a good relationship with Paul. He's going to buy stuff from me. It's fine, But if I can say, hey, we did this one thing differently. We used data, and look, Paul still bought stuff from me, but his average order size is now $2,000 more than it used to be because he's now seeing this data. So capturing that insight and then sharing it and communicating it. If you talk to any of my customer success guys at Hoodie, they are awesome. And just saying, hey, tell me your wins and share your story. And half of it, it's not for us, candidly, because we want them thinking about it and documenting it. So they're telling other people in their organization to say, hey, if we do this thing, look at what it can do. And then now imagine if everyone in this role was doing it every day, and leveraging data was just like, waking up in the morning, brushing my teeth, taking my shower, and looking at the data today so I can define what I need to spend my next several hours doing. And if we can get to that point, as an industry, we're going to be making a lot more profit, a lot more money.
Thank you so much. Well, Kris, you've shared so much great stuff with us today, and it's time for our last call. So, Kris, what's your final message for our listeners? Advice, call to action, closing thought to leave them with?
I would come out and see us at hoodieanalytics.com if you haven't already. We'd love to talk to you. We're in the business to help brands make better decisions and operators make better decisions using data. Because if you're making better decisions, you're going to make more money, you're going to be more profitable, and everyone wins. And we'd love to talk to you about how we can support your business in doing just that.
Nice. I love it. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We've really appreciated your insight, and I think that there's been some great takeaways for folks. So have a great one, Kris. Good luck with everything. Connect. Yeah. All right, folks. Well, that's the episode. How'd I do without Ben? Engage. Thank you for everyone that engaged with us in the comments on LinkedIn. Please continue to engage with us. If you liked this episode, drop us a review on Apple or Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts. It really helps listeners find our content. And thank you to our support from our teams at Vertosa and Wolf Meyer, and to our producer, Eric Rossetti. Subscribe, share High Spirits with your colleagues, friends, and family. And as always, folks, stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, keep your spirits high. That's a wrap. Thanks, Kris.